the chances that you are born in the exact same place where you would also be the happiest, the freest, the most successful that you can possibly be is pretty close to zero. Traveling purposefully with the intent of testing and experimenting a whole lot of different places on weather, business climate, dating life, languages, cultures, all these different things that impact you so much would serve you really well.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's another episode of Remotely Serious. Whether you're listening on the podcast feed or you're seeing myself and my guest on video, it's probably going to be one of the first video podcasts that we distribute. This is the third one I'm recording. I think we'll release them in that order. But for the possibly third video podcast for Remotely Serious with your host, Curtis Duggan, I'm here with James from Freedom Files. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks for having me. And I'm honored to be your only third ever video podcast. That's sweet. Congrats.
Yeah, we had a good year last year on audio. I did the thing of like I'm not going to do a podcast and I'm not going to stop and I'm going to do more and more and more. But I did take a break, slap me. I took a break over the last 3 months. I went to Costa Rica, I went to Middle East and Saudi Arabia, and I didn't do podcasts for about 8 to 10 weeks. So now I want to relaunch and get back into consistency and habit. Ideally forever. We'll see where it goes. But I've been following mostly your content on X. You might be other places, but I'm on X a lot, and that's where I've seen your content. And I find it really interesting because you kind of have both a totally non-traditional path, but you've also hit some of the beats of the themes that come up when people talk about digital nomads, remote work, sovereign individuals, and freedom. So I'm not trying to put all of those labels on you, but you seem to have a cool story where you are American, I assume. I'm Canadian, so sometimes I have to ask, but I assume you're American.
I am. Yep, I am.
Yeah, and you made it down to Colombia, and you talk a lot about the Latin lifestyle, the sovereign lifestyle. So, when did you first head down to South America, and was that the first place that you went when you decided to travel and become freer?
Yes, Latin America was the first spot that I came almost 3 years ago. So in 2021, I quit my job. And then about 5 or 6 months later, once I had a little bit of income, monthly income coming in from my new marketing business that I had started, that's when I took the leap and said, I don't need to be strapped down to a single city anymore. So came down here to Colombia, and since then have lived in 10 different countries, most of which have been in Latin America, a couple in Europe. But really, I'm based here in Colombia.
And when you came down, I feel like we're past it now, but we're still just, you say a couple years ago. Did COVID or the pandemic factor into your decision at all? I guess is that 2021 or 2022 when you came down, or is that irrelevant to your decision to come down to travel around in 10 or 12 different countries?
Well, that's a very loaded question with a very loaded response because COVID made me realize a ton of different things. It wasn't just that. I mean, where do I even get started? COVID made me realize a ton of things. One, that our money supply is screwed. Two, that I wasn't in control of my own life in terms of when I work, how I work, where I work, all these different types of things related to a career. Uh, COVID made me realize that I didn't control my own time, which was the real dagger. That because I'm a time billionaire was such a hard realization to come to terms with. The fact that you don't control your time when you're a time billionaire is not a good thing, right? Like
Hmm.
if you were a millionaire, just a money millionaire I'm talking about, and you didn't control your own money, you know that that would be a disaster. So the fact that someone controlled my schedule, someone controlled my time, someone controlled when I could take vacations and where I could take them, blah blah blah, that COVID made me realize all these different things. So yes, it was the impetus, but like I read so many books that helped me through that time. I looked to people who are much smarter than I am during that time who helped me realize that entrepreneurship is the way forward, location independence is the way forward, controlling your own time through owning like multiple different businesses that scale your time instead of your money is the way forward. So I'm sure we'll get into all those different topics,
Yeah.
but short story, yeah,
Yeah,
COVID
I'm curious.
was the
A lot of
impetus.
people will start to dislike their job and either want more freedom or more money, and they'll become an entrepreneur. And some people will also say, I'd like my job to be remote and keep the same job, but see if I can work from Mexico. It sounds like you kind of flipped the table on quite a few different things at once. What was the first thing you thought about? Did you think I want to be an entrepreneur, or did you think I need to get out of here and leave the country and then I'll figure it out? Which of the many things that you changed was the first thing you wanted to change?
Definitely a job. I've always been
Yeah.
entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
so that was instinctual. It was just a matter of time until I got up the courage
Mhm.
to quit my job and start something. Even when I didn't even have a plan when I quit. Um, but things came together really quickly.
Yeah. Was the first business you started profitable quickly, or did you have to try a few things to get to a profitable MRR?
I was profitable right away, and I'm lucky in that sense because I had a really, really good business network where I was based at the time. I was based in Indianapolis, Indiana, and knew a lot of really, really cool people. So when I quit my job, I wanted to do something that I was already kind of known for, and that was like digital strategy. I
Hmm.
worked at a kind of a old school consulting firm, and I was the youngest one there, and I was obviously because of that kind of the digital guy there. So it was kind of a natural transition, and then I started working with people who I had connected with over the last 2 years before that, and I was able to scale up pretty quickly. Since then, I've changed quite a bit in what I do to get more niche and to get more specific on what actually I provide people. But at the time, yeah, we were profitable pretty quickly.
That's good. Yeah, it's a different journey than a lot of people go on. So that's fortunate, and it's probably a testament to your skills as a business person. How did you think about the travel part when in terms of researching where to go? Was it on instinct? Did you research it? How did you? Where's the first place you went, and how did you decide to go there?
I mean, it was totally by chance. I had a buddy when I was in Indianapolis who really really fell in love with Medellin, Colombia, and what he told me about this city was that it was so green. It's this nestled little city in a valley where, I mean, it's the city of eternal spring, so the weather doesn't change. It's always, well, not always sunny. It rains a lot. It's raining right now, actually.
Hmm.
But what he told me about this city was something that I wanted to try. And initially, when I came here, it was just a trial. But I ended up meeting my girlfriend in my third week there, and 3 years later, I'm still here uh,
Yeah.
after living in a lot of different countries. But yeah, that it was a total random choice that Medellin was my first spot.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to go to Medellin for cost of living and, entrepreneurial success and community of other entrepreneurs, and it's a sovereign individual destination, it's a nomad destination. It's also, you can't deny that a lot of male nomads talk about it as a dating destination. I know that there's some cultural things going on there and just sort of things happening there that maybe we can talk about a little bit. But it sounds like whatever you did for dating, but within 3 weeks, you are with a girlfriend that you're with now still. After 3 weeks in Medellin.
Yeah, so I met my
Yeah,
girlfriend in my third week there. I was
yeah,
initially only going to spend 4 weeks there and then hop on to Costa
yeah,
Rica and then Panama.
yeah.
And I canceled everything once I met her. And it wasn't. You hear that a lot where people like cancel all their plans and because they
Hmm.
met someone so special, and usually it doesn't turn out to be that way. But I was lucky. I stuck it out for about 9 more months to see what exactly would come of that relationship. And again, like I said, 3 years later, we're still together. She lives with me, and we have some bigger plans together as well. So
Yeah, and
I'm very fortunate.
I know it's kind of getting into personal stuff, but maybe just in general, did that mean that when you went to 10 countries that you were then traveling as a couple, or were you seeing 9 other countries single or alone, I guess, or long distance?
I wasn't single. I was technically with her, but she
Hmm.
was not physically with me. She was here in
Yeah.
Colombia while I did not have a visa. I had to leave the country.
Hmm.
So I went to Costa Rica, Panama, as I originally planned, but just not in that original time frame. Ecuador, Spain, Italy, France, Argentina, Uruguay, Peru, whole lot of places.
Hmm.
Um, and that was really just because I didn't have a visa in Colombia to stay there. But also, there was a reason I didn't get a visa. It's because I wanted to explore a little bit more, um, and that was a blast. I mean, I don't regret anything about that. I After 2 years of that, though, I lived in
Hmm.
those 10 different countries in the span of about 2 years. If you calculate how much time I averaged in each of those countries, it's very little time in each city and
Hmm.
in each country. It wears on you,
Yeah.
emotionally, physically. So I wanted to base up, and the natural place to do that with my girlfriend here was Medellin, Colombia. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a sense of, obviously there's a reason to be deeply connected now to Colombia. Do you have a sense of all the countries and cities that you went to, what you might have liked, or whether you would have liked some of those as a permanent base instead of Medellin in a different situation?
Totally, 100%.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, part of the again, I'm sure we'll get into this, but part of the sovereign lifestyle that I strive to live for and that I talk about a lot. I'm kind of like open sourcing my little journey here to ultimate
Hmm.
freedom. Um, is the multiple base location independence. I don't think it's realistic for me to have a single base in my life to live all my days in one single city. Um,
Hmm.
for tax reasons, for weather reasons, for happiness reasons, for business reasons, I mean, there are so many different benefits to becoming location independent and having multiple bases. So managing Colombia will probably be, as long as I'm with my girlfriend. I love the city as well. It's not just for her. Um, will probably always be a base. I really love Buenos Aires in Argentina. Uh, Spain will likely be another base of mine, and I've still so many other places to explore. But I know that Colombia and Spain are top two on my list right now. Buenos Aires is probably
Yeah.
third.
Yeah. Buenos Aires seems to be heating up even more.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Running Remote a year ago, and the Buenos Aires like Ministry of Tourism or whatever you call it was there, which is kind of like, it's almost like if it's bubbled up out of Reddit and the forums and the Telegram group chats into the actual official ministry, the normies being like, we need to promote this, then it's starting to get on the radar. Yeah, I'm curious. Let's get into the sovereign individual bit a little bit. I do want to talk about Spain, but in general, if I think back, sovereign individual, I knew that there was that book. I've heard that title maybe for years and years. The next, I'm just trying to take my journey of like, let's say the last even 10 years of even just knowing about this concept. And I was like a startup CEO in New York where I actually wasn't thinking about this stuff until about 2020 or even 2021, the same year you were. But I was kind of on a different journey up until 2021. But I did see these YouTube videos by Nomad Capitalist where the CEO Andrew would come on and be like, I gave up my US citizenship. It's kind of flag theory. I want to, even back then, pre 2020, there was kind of the frankly probably gray area illegal thing of just like, if you just keep traveling, you don't have a tax base. So it was kind of this industry that was a gray area. It was exciting. It still is exciting. And it's matured, and there's a lot more people speaking eloquently about it now. Um, but one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was that Andrew's like, there's people like Andrew, the CEO of Nomad Capitalist, who are like, renounce your U.S. citizenship. You must leave the G7. Whether it's people that are anti-Trudeau in Canada, where I am, Americans that want to renounce the taxation everywhere, or the same thing in the UK and France. There's kind of this movement to leave. But it sounds like I've seen some of your posts on X where that might not be something that you've been passionate about. So where do you stand on this kind of idea of like, in order to be free, you must renounce American citizenship because then you're out of the tax net? How have you thought about that problem? Like the nomad capitalist guys are always talking about.
Everyone's situation is completely unique.
Hmm.
Um, for me, I am not interested in renouncing my American citizenship in this moment in my life. That doesn't mean that I won't do it later in my life. But right now, I need convenient access to the United States. My mom lives there. My brothers live there. My friends live there. A lot of my friends live there.
Hmm.
A couple of my clients live there. I need like instant access to the United States. Is that worth the taxes that I have to pay, even though I spend 0 days a year in the U.S.? No. Yes, I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I'm only my third year of living a lifestyle like this, and to be able to tell you concretely that I am like I need to make such an irreversible decision as renouncing my US citizenship now, or suggesting it to other people, recommending it to other people, uh, would be really, really ignorant of me. So in the next 5 years, 10 years, I again don't think I'll renounce my US citizenship. Maybe when I'm 60, maybe when I'm 65, 70. Um, it's an option.
Hmm.
I will obviously need more citizenships than I currently have, uh, because I don't want to be left with just one citizenship. A lot of this location independence that I'm striving for right now is based around the idea that I want to have multiple citizenships, want to have multiple residencies in the event that something like COVID happens again, because a lot of people realized, oh, migration routes are closed.
Hmm.
Oh, my employer or the government is forcing me to do things I don't want to do. Oh, my bank account was frozen because I said things online that I shouldn't have said. Shouldn't have said. Like all these different things. So that's the whole purpose of Andrew saying that. I don't know if he's ever said you should renounce your U.S. citizenship if you're a U.S. citizen,
No, I think it
but
was more I did, not you should, but I think he did. But yeah, yeah,
gotcha. Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's totally subjective and unique to everybody's situation. It's impossible to say. It's impossible to recommend to someone without knowing their complete situation what to do, because it, it's just impossible to prescribe something if you don't know exactly what's going on there.
yeah. So you've mentioned a few things. I think most of our listeners might know this, but just in case, like the concept of bases, a word that you've mentioned, is essentially the idea of homes, but in a different kind of terminology where we maybe downgrade them one tick from homes. They're still homes, but it's the kind of thing where I have a base in Costa Rica, let's say, and a base in Portugal, and that means that you have some semi-permanence or permanence in that place, maybe literally a house, or a dwelling of some sort, and you have kind of the basic amenities set up, whether it's a vehicle that could be anything, a bike or a car, and the driver's license and or the healthcare. And of course, there's all kinds of things around how many driver's license and where to have it and where to have the banks. But basically, you have some stability in a certain place, and that's what we call a base. Um, there does seem to be this. Well, it doesn't. There's definitely this industry popping up around people in this space and marketers and consultants online who are talking about multiple bases and residencies and passports. Um, some of them start to say like, I'm collecting 3, 4, 5. I'm going to have 6 or 7 residencies. I'm heading to Dubai to get my next residency, and then someday I'm going to have 7 passports. I think a lot of people, if they're just living their normal lives, probably would start to ask why. Maybe even after, like a lot of people would say after one, why, and we can answer that. We I think we're on the same page. Two, at least two is good. But how do you feel, or where do you stand on kind of the idea of collecting lots and lots of these things? Is there increasing benefit or diminishing benefit on this? I'm kind of like at a loss for why you would need more than, let's say, three. That seems like the management of it starts to lose its uh, the cost of, and just a mental cost of managing more than
Yeah.
three seems lose the benefits
Uh,
after
I
three.
mean,
You know.
you're spot on with diminishing returns. Personally, I don't sell like any passport services or residency services or anything like that.
Hmm.
I in I run a content agency that serves firms that do that, serves immigration law firms and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
However, I don't do that myself. So I don't feel like I have a fiduciary responsibility to help people through that discussion of like multiple passports, multiple residencies. The reason I talk about it online is because I'm genuinely interested in having multiple passports, multiple residencies, multiple homes, blah, blah, blah. And diversifying away from a single authority, diversifying away from a single company or government. When you get into having discourse with someone who also sells those things for a living, helps you get passports or helps you get residencies in another country, then you border, I mean, like integrity issues, right?
Hmm.
Because does this person who has five passports to their name really need a sixth one? In most situations, I would say no. I think the majority of people are fine with two passports, the
Yeah.
wide majority of people. And they don't even need to consider uh, another residence permit on top of that, on top of those two citizenships. Or they're fine with one citizenship and two residency permits.
Hmm.
It doesn't need to be as complicated as getting five passports, which I don't think you'll ever need. A lot of people just like to collect them as items. Um, those are pretty expensive items for collecting. If you're
Hmm.
into like hundreds and thousands of dollars of paper floating around in
Yeah.
your back pocket, um, but yeah, the people who recommend that you have five, six passports, and that doom is always coming around the corner, and that we're entering the fourth turning. Well, that might be true, but uh, that we're entering like a new phase of globalism that will take over the world, and you're not safe with just one passport, two passports, blah blah blah. If they're also selling services, just be aware of that.
Hmm.
I'm I have I like to talk through my own experience on YouTube, on Twitter, um, on X, whatever it's called, and I like to talk about multiple passports because I'm on that mission of getting two to three passports. Maybe that's about tops, and a couple residency permits on top of that, which don't cost the hundreds of thousands of dollars
Hmm.
that a citizenship might. So it's all about fiduciary responsibility, I think.
Do you think that everyone should do this, or if you're talking to people back in Indiana or anywhere, um, and they say, I imagine most of them are like, that's cool. I'm going to keep living my life. But for the ones that do engage and say, I'm interested in what you did, how could I do it myself? Do you think most people that are interested in this lifestyle should do it? Or are there certain personality traits where you might say, hey, I know you're interested in going to Colombia, but remember, you got to know this, this, and this. And, if you're, let's say, whether you drink or not, you're a few beers in and you just kind of say, hey, to your friend, I think you don't have this or that quality, it's going to be hard, or you're going to get frustrated because of XYZ. Um, what do you think everyone should do this at least once, or is it just sort of a niche thing for a very large, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, but not everyone should, leave their birth country with their friends and family and try and make it in Medellin or in Latin America? How do you think about that?
I mean, like I said, I think for the vast majority of people, having two passports is fine.
Hmm.
Um, I think people would be really served well if they traveled purposefully at one point in their lives. Doesn't matter if you're from Indiana or if you're from North Dakota like me or if you're from Bangladesh. Um, Traveling purposefully with the intent of testing and experimenting a whole lot of different places on weather, business climate, like dating life, languages, cultures, all these different things that impact you so much. would serve you really well. The chances that you are born in the exact same place where you would also be the happiest, the freest, the most successful that you can possibly be is pretty close to zero. And I'm willing to say that about pretty much everyone in the world. The world is huge. We have about
Hmm.
190 countries, almost 200 countries. And the fact that you were born in just one of those countries means that you have so much more to explore. And that just because you're told from the day that you were born in the freest country or the happiest country or the most successful country doesn't necessarily mean that it's the happiest country for you or the freest country for you, because you have your own priorities, you have your own goals, and those don't necessarily match the entirety of the population of your birth country. And that's kind of what I realized of the last 2 years. I had always been told that America's the best place on earth to live. It's the wealthiest country in the world, which is true. That's a fact. Um, it's the freest place on earth, which a lot of people can say is true. But I feel freer right now in my life elsewhere, and that's okay. And I feel happier elsewhere, and that's okay. That's not to say that in 3 years I might move back to the United States and I might be happier and freer there than I am here in Colombia. I don't know. But right now I'm just kind of surfing the wave, and like I said, I do think that most people would be served well if they did test and experiment their lives in a couple different places, just to see where they're happiest, where they're freest, where they're most successful, where they're most wealthy. Because those are like really big life decisions. Where you live is like the most important.
So if someone is, let's say someone's listening to this podcast and is hearing you speak, and let's just say they're in Austin, Texas, and they got a nice job, mid 20s or any age, um, working in marketing, let's say, or whatever, and they wake up Monday morning and they think, you know what, I would like to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to travel. I'm going to experiment with different places to see where I like best, and I'm going to expand what I know about the world. What would you suggest they do first? Are there beginner locations they should go to? Is there a certain kind of research that they should do? But if they're really adventurous and they're ready and they're like, 2 weeks from now I'm doing it, what advice might you give someone who's just casting off for the first time?
Hmm, that's a good question. The primary considerations would probably be, for most people, budget. Time zone is obviously a concern if you're remote working or if you're building your own business. If you have to work with clients, time zone is a big consideration. Um, Budget and like cost of living, you can kind of fit those into one consideration, and maybe like regional differences, which I don't think a lot of people consider. So I'll jump into each of those. When I left the United States almost 3 years ago now, I had started my business like 5 months before that, and because of that, I wasn't like wealthy by any means yet, and I, I don't know how to define that still, but I wanted to reduce my expenses in order to pocket more income every month as I was growing my business. That money was really important to me. So reducing my expenses was really important. So I was earning dollars, and it made it really easy to go down to Latin America and spend pesos, because of the arbitrage between the dollar and the peso. I could save a lot more every month and build my business a little bit faster that way. That was really valuable. It was cheaper here in Medellin, Colombia, and Panama and Ecuador when I came down here, so that I could save a lot more and devote that money to my savings. So cost of living is a big deal. For a lot of reasons, people select Latin America for that reason. Southern Europe and like the Balkans, which is kind of a surprise pick, but it is cheaper than the rest of Europe, and Southeast Asia. So those
Hmm.
three regions, people select those for the cost of living. Then time zone. So if you're remote working or if you're building a business and working with your clients or working with your teammates is important, time zone is a big consideration. That's why I came down here to Latin America. It was one of the reasons because I was working with American clients. I didn't want to go down to Southeast Asia and have to wake up at 3 a.m. for meetings. That would
Hmm.
stink, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to do that. So, and I'm sure you can empathize with that, Curtis. So again, Latin America made it easy. In Europe, that's somewhat easy. You just have to wake up a little earlier and configure your schedule so that you can meet with your clients maybe in the morning first or in the afternoon versus their morning. Southeast Asia makes that almost
Yeah. It's
not healthy anyway,
the opposite.
not
Yeah. It's like
sustainable.
Dubai is the opposite, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then that third consideration was regional differences. So
Yeah. What
another
do you mean
really
by
cool
that?
thing,
Yeah. What does that
yeah,
mean?
another really cool thing about Latin America is that throughout the whole region, all the way from Mexico to Argentina, there's only about one language,
Hmm.
with the exception of obviously Brazil, who speaks Portuguese, which I can understand a little bit because I'm fluent in Spanish now. But from Mexico down to Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Argentina, all these countries speak Spanish. So with you hopping from Colombia to Ecuador to Panama to Mexico, you're not, I mean, those cultures are somewhat similar because they were former Spanish colonies, because they speak Spanish. You're not having to adjust so much. Like if you compare this to Eastern Europe, and you're bouncing from Hungary to Bulgaria to Moldova to
Hmm.
Romania to Ukraine, all those countries speak different languages. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe that's not the best example, but Southeast Asia, Laotian, Cambodian, Thai, all these
Yeah.
languages are very
Com-
different,
Quite different. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you have to learn the new language every time or not connect with locals at all. That was actually a goal of mine as well. I wanted to learn Spanish and connect with local people, local business people, local entrepreneurs. That was important to me. If that's not important to you, then just discard this
Yeah.
this whole recommendation. But if it's important to you to learn the language, to connect with people, I think regional differences make Latin America a really obvious choice.
Yeah, I remember when I was probably a teenager, or maybe early 20s, just looking at a map and seeing the Americas and Europe, and realizing that if I know English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese, there's this swath of land and ocean that starts up in Alaska all the way down to the bottom of Patagonia and Chile, and then all the entire Americas, and then Ireland, England, France, Spain, Portugal. And there's just so many countries you can almost kind of draw a line around it, and you can speak anywhere if you have English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Obviously, there are some indigenous languages, there are some Aztec languages, there's some Icelandic languages out in the middle of the ocean, which are cool too. But basically, if you draw around Iceland and you draw around some places, basically there's this huge shape where you can speak English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. And then, of course, it's like, okay, then I would need to start learning, like, how would I move the map over? I would need to learn Italian and German. And then once you get to Eastern Europe, like you mentioned, it's like every 300 miles down Montenegro, Albania, Greece, Macedonia. It's like new language every 300 or 400 miles. So that's really cool. And I don't think as many. I think this is really interesting because not as many people talk about this when they're comparing Latin America to Southeast Asia, and it's like cost of living. Oh, Thailand, bro, this is what it costs for street food in Thailand. But I'm gonna bet that there's certainly more people that are authentically learning Spanish and integrating in Mexico, in Costa Rica, in Panama, in all of these places in Latin America, versus people who are sitting down and saying, I am going to learn the local Balinese language or Vietnamese or Thai with their different alphabetic scripts, and they're often in their different languages. Indonesian has English, the Latin alphabet, but I've never heard of anyone, and I'm sure there are people, but it's just not talked about, and I'm sure it's a smaller fraction. So that's like, I think that's really underrated. Actually, I think it's obvious. Like, of course, you would start to speak Spanish if you were in Costa Rica, but it's just not obvious that people don't do that when they go to Bali, unless just people that I don't know about, but I don't hear people talking about that.
No, I think you're right, and I think there's a when you're traveling the world, I think it's a form of respect to learn the language of the people who are around you. So I, especially because I was spending a lot of time in cities that people don't usually go to, that are
Hmm.
not like nomad hotspots, or on like they're not on trending lists on nomad lists or anything. Um, it was really important for me to connect with those people and not for them to think that I was just another ignorant nomad, which is a take that people living this lifestyle can hear quite a bit. I didn't want to be one of those. So learning the language is really important to me.
Yeah, let's talk about becoming sovereign. And I just before this recording, I watched I think it was about a 15-minute clip of you talking about 7 or 8 or 9 different ways of becoming sovereign, and it was things like get your own income streams, get passive income, get multiple residencies and passports, like we've talked about. I'm curious, there's things like fitness, families, and friendship where it's a lifelong journey. So you still want to be 80 years old and getting your flexibility, working out. You want to be still getting fit the day you die when you're old. And you still want to be nurturing friendships the day you die when you're old. With sovereignty, do you feel like this is a lifelong journey? Every day I'm trying to become more sovereign? Or is it something where you feel like you can get there? Okay, I've got these passports, I've got this much passive income, this much active income, I've got multiple residencies. I'm 40 years old. I did it. I'm sovereign. I'm done. Can you get to done, or are you always trying to become more sovereign every day that you're alive? Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
is it a
totally.
is it a
I'm.
forever journey?
It is a forever journey
Yeah.
because, especially, your sovereignty is not my sovereignty. My freedom is not your freedom. I don't know how
Yeah.
to define that for you. I know how to define it for me, and it's changed quite a bit in the last 3 years. Like, for example, my definition of ultimate freedom is uh, to be able to do whatever I want, where I want, whenever I want, how I want, without the fear of those freedoms being taken away. That's my definition. Um, and a lot of those things that I talked about in that video were guidelines, but they're not
Hmm.
necessarily very specific goals, like requirements. They're not requirements. They're guidelines. Um, and that's how I'm living out my this this dream of ultimate freedom that I talk about. For someone else, if they have zero intention of traveling, then citizenships, residencies, those things aren't important to them.
Hmm.
Multiple bases around the world, that's not important to them. Uh, they're probably more focused on the things that I mentioned around uh, becoming like a mental and physical specimen, becoming
Yeah.
insanely healthy in those aspects, and building a family and building generational wealth with a woman that you love, if it's a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
With whoever you love. Yeah.
yeah. So it's whatever you make of it, right? I think something that I didn't mention in that post and in the
Hmm.
YouTube video was uh, that you first have to define sovereignty to you. What is freedom to you, and then make up those 10 or 5 uh, requirements or goals that matter to you, because the goalposts will always move. Once you have those multiple citizenships that I talked about, you won't feel more free than you were before. But just knowing that you have multiple citizenships, or that you're a mental or physical specimen, or that you have a generational family that you have to take care of, it's a good safety net. I think that's a good marker for that sovereign lifestyle that I was talking about in that video.
Yeah.
Um, but it first comes down to you defining what that is to you, and then making up your own goals, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. There are many ways to become sovereign, and it sounds like you've become sovereign across many different dimensions around your online business income and the Colombia, and then eventually Spain and more places. So these are kind of an online business on the internet as it is now, and residency or citizenship in Colombia and the USA and other places is generally working within the existing system. And there are a lot of people that are looking to disrupt or upend or innovate on the system, whether that's through cryptocurrency or new nation states, network states, different types of network state citizenship projects like Prospera in Honduras, or the Praxis City that eventually, I assume, will exist in the Mediterranean somewhere. Do you have much of an interest in that world where people are talking about, well, what we'll use the Ethereum blockchain to do some kind of nation state, or we're going to have a free trade economic zone in this part of this country? Does that whole world of sovereignty interest you? The more, a little bit, let's just say it, a little bit more sci-fi type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think just yesterday Brian Johnson came out and said he wants to create his own country as well.
Yeah, yeah.
It interests me for sure. I don't want to pretend that I know too much about it and talk about it out of turn.
Hmm.
But it does interest me. I think it's something to watch, especially if the people who are talking about it are working on it,
Hmm.
like the likes of Brian Johnson, Balaji Srinivasan. Like these are really extremely powerful and influential and wealthy people who have built things before. So it won't
Yeah.
surprise me if they build these on the blockchain, and if they can manage to. I know the Prospera community is having some issues in Honduras right now. I don't know how that's going to play out, and don't quote me on that. I don't really know the situation over there, but it's something to watch for sure. I'll just leave it at
Yeah.
that. I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, no, I mean, in Prosper, we've had them on the podcast, and we've had Jay talk about indirectly or a little bit directly about those issues. But I think the general point is that some of the projects are very interesting and have made a lot of progress, but are fundamentally still interacting with a nation state that has sovereignty and can change politicians in a democracy. And so that's just something that still needs to be worked out about the stability of these projects in general. I don't want to speak wrongly about the details of Prospera, but basically, if you create an economic zone anywhere, if the next president comes in or prime minister comes in and says, I don't like this, I don't think that problem has been solved yet. Even if Praxis were to build their city on the ocean, neoclassical, neo-Greece, neo-Rome city somewhere on the Adriatic coast or wherever they're doing it, I assume wherever it is, Croatia, Montenegro, Greece, Italy, Albania, whatever, they're still going to have them be at the mercy of the nation state. So I'm interested, and I like hearing about these things, but I'm just skeptically waiting to hear how that works, or like what happens if you get invaded, or like, do you have a police army, that kind of thing, all those things that are kind of annoying. Not annoying, that's the wrong
Yeah,
word, but like nationhood is more complicated than a tech company. I think it's fair to say that. Maybe some tech companies are very complicated in certain ways, but I think nations have more complex stakeholders than just like employees, shareholders, etc. So anyway, I'm
yeah.
going on about this a little bit, but I think I would love to see someone kind of directly address that, and I just don't feel like anybody's addressed that. It's very optimistic, which is great, but I'm waiting for
They're
like to feel real.
they're very certainly ambitious projects. I will
Yeah.
say, if you look at a list of like the number of countries who the number of countries that have been created and or like lost, have
Hmm.
dissolved in the last 100 years, there are way more on that list than you would ever think.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think our kind of like monkey brains think that, oh, our world has always already been created, we're good to go now, no new
Yeah.
nations, no nations that we currently have are going to dissolve, we're all good. uh, but the fact of like human nature, the fact of human history points to there being way more countries added to that list and way more countries disbanding,
Hmm.
um, through war, through famine and struggle, through uh, just changing borders. All different kinds of things could happen. So it's not like sci-fi necessarily that I think a lot of these people are kind of dreaming up new
Hmm.
uh, literal nations, but
Yeah.
the means by which they're doing it, that's going to be new. the fact
Yeah.
that we're talking about like blockchain governments and blockchain voting and all this kind of stuff, that's completely new. But also the fact you asked me if I would like bet on any of these projects, if I would, if they really interest me in order to get like citizenship or to get involved somehow. I think if you were on the ground floor of Bitcoin in 2009 and
Hmm.
you were one of the first investors in Bitcoin, today you would say, "Oh, that was such an easy, obvious investment. How did no one else notice this but me?"
Yeah.
I think if this pans out, I think people are going to think on Prospera. People are going to think on Praxis like that. People who invested early are going to be like, "Why? Why wouldn't you have invested in this project?" And the
Yeah.
people on the outside are like, "Let me in.
Yeah.
I've wanted to become a citizen of a new country for years. Let me in."
Yeah.
And
Any
you
class,
had the
any
opportunity.
classic investment curve. Like now that I've seen proof,
Yeah,
now I want in, but the price of the brick's gone up. Yeah, it's like
exactly. So
classic. Yeah, yeah.
it's
No, I hear
it's
you. I hear you. Yeah,
it's the age of the early adopters. We'll see who acts. We'll see if those
yeah.
pan out. I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine.
So, well, let's we'll get close to wrapping it up. But to bring it back to more practical, I mean, I agree with you. So first, one last thing, I agree that it's not. I shouldn't say sci-fi because it is present day and it's happening now. And I'm excited to see. I think by 2025, 2026, we will start to see some of the initial questions answered, and I might get over this hump of like, are these things really going to happen? But to be more practical and just sort of about countries that do exist right now, um, what is it about? I mean, there's lots of obvious reasons, but how did you arrive at Spain in addition to the USA and Colombia as a third base that you're interested in, or possibly pursuing?
Uh the
Just the food?
food is
Yeah,
food is one reason. Quality of life is another. I have really loved my time in Spain.
yeah.
The little amount of time that I have spent there, I have enjoyed it a whole ton. Madrid is probably one of my favorite cities in the world. Um, Apart from like actual practical stuff, well, that's more like intangible stuff. The EU is a very strong, less so every day, but very strong coalition. And to have a passport in the EU allows you to have residency rights throughout that continent, pretty much, almost.
Hmm.
Um, if you have a Spanish passport, you have residency rights in Italy, in Germany, in uh, any other
Everywhere.
EU
Yeah.
member state. That's a big deal. It also, if I have a Spanish passport, I have all the visa-free access around the world that Spanish offers the Spanish government offers their citizens, or other governments offer Spanish citizens. With a U.S. passport alone, I have about like 180 countries that I can go to visa-free. Colombia is not that strong. It's about like
Hmm.
130 or maybe 140 countries. Um, so my plan of kind of like diversifying my citizenry across the world and not relying on a single citizenship, not relying on a single government to kind of dictate things for me, is to have multiple. And that includes having a Colombian, and that includes having a Spanish one at some point in the future. The
Hmm.
reason I chose Spain is because my girlfriend is Colombian and she can get Spanish citizenship really quickly.
Hmm.
So that means that if I'm with her, whether legally or just like figuratively, I can get access to Spanish citizenship that way as well. So, in summary, it's an easier path to EU citizenship for me than through pretty much any other country in Europe. Um, and again, why would I do that? It's just to diversify my assets, diversify my quality of life. I love Spain. I love living there, um, and reduce the risk around having just a single citizenship. Again, not everybody has to do that, but that's something that I'm interested in, especially in the event that I do renounce my U.S. citizenship later in my life when I'm 60 or 70,
Yeah. You
because
have an
then I lose
equivalent,
one and
oh, high power passport. Let's, if we call it that, to move
exactly,
to. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, It sounds like you've sped run or speed ran the what a lot of people do over, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or 5 to 10 years, where you were a digital nomad but then very quickly have a second base or a first base, if you want to call it that, and then you'll get multiple bases, and you're doing that all pretty quickly. Do you foresee lots of international travel in your future? Do you like, thinking that you'll spend 10 months out of the year or 6 months out of the year in Colombia, 6 and 6 Spain and Colombia? Or do you foresee kind of traveling the world a week at a time, a month at a time, as something that's in your future? What do you like to do with your freedom?
I will probably I will probably never do a month, a month in each place. I'm probably, because I'm building a couple different businesses. Those require my focus and energy and
Mm-hmm.
capital. And running around the world as frequently as I did over the last 2 years was difficult,
Yeah.
mentally, physically, energetically, all that kind of stuff. But I can say that I still love traveling. I would like to do about 5 months in Colombia, maybe 5 months in Spain, and 2 months of travel, sparsely populated throughout the year, with my girlfriend and eventual family. So it's not shutting off travel completely, but I would like to base up. I'm based here in Medellin, and I would like to base in Spain as well for that European, like Southern European lifestyle. But I'm not cut out for the month to month to month traveling. That's not so much me anymore.
Yeah, it's good to know that. And I think a lot of people probably come to that realization too late, and they're like, why have I been exhausting myself for 7 years out of like an identity thing, that this is what I do because I'm a digital nomad. um, James, where can people find more about you or Freedom Files on the internet if they want to learn more about you or Freedom Files?
Well, I'm on Twitter, like you mentioned. I'm
Yeah,
on YouTube. If you just search James Freedom Files, and freedomfiles.co is my website where I write all about my individual journey to ultimate freedom.
great. We'll put all those in the show notes, and we'll see if we can, we'll put them on the YouTube channel. We'll put them anywhere you can find it. James, it's been great. I'm excited to keep watching your content on X, and we'll post this video soon, and we can share it with our listeners and our viewers now, I guess, as well. So thanks for joining.
Curtis, appreciate you. That you had some really curious questions, that I didn't think you were going to ask. So you got me out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, I can't remember if we said that before or after the mic was on, but we were talking at the beginning about getting out of the comfort zone. So we did it a little bit, James, and we'll do it again sometime.
Of
Maybe not
course,
now, maybe not next month, but we'll have you back on at some point, because I like, and I'm just gonna, like, this is, there's no script, but I'm still going off script. Like, I really like how you're like, yeah, I'm not a digital nomad anymore. I'm basing up here. I'm doing businesses, so I can feel like, I can sense that, in a year the things are going to be different, and it's not going to be because, oh, I went to 15 other countries and I went here and here and here. It's going to be because your goals are further, your businesses are doing more, and you're learning more, and you're going deeper in the bases that you're in. So I want to have more conversations like that, because we do have a lot of conversations with people and like, what's happened since I talked to you, and it's like, well, I was in these other 10 countries, and that's great, but there's other ways to grow, as you've mentioned. So thanks again, James.
awesome, Curtis. Thanks.